Is it just me, or does Formula One just get that little bit better every single time it rains? The added tension, the added jeopardy made this Monaco Grand Prix weekend absolutely exceptional to watch. Like, honestly, I thought we were just going to see a little bit of a parade on Sunday, and I think most fans agreed with that Saturday was going to be the most important factor. But a little bit of rain just before the Grand Prix was due to start changed up everything, and that's why I want to talk today about my 3 biggest winners and 3 biggest losers from this weekend's Monaco Grand Prix. And I think we have to start off by talking about Sergio Perez to begin with. Obviously went on to win the Grand Prix, so it was an easy choice, but actually was immense over the entire Grand Prix weekend. In every single free practice, he looked like he was just finding that extra little bit of pace in the Red Bull this weekend. Obviously he had that little slip in qualifying, looked like he'd handed Ferrari the weekend, obviously hitting into the wall, his tyres not quite being in the window that he wanted to be, handed Charles Leclerc that pole position. It looked like Ferrari were going to just drive off into the distance and Red Bull were going to have to catch up on those points at a later date, but no, the rain came. Obviously had that opportunity to change his strategy, went onto the intermediate tyres first, and I think just him being the first to blink, being the one to gamble, being the one to go for it, showed his quality and showed what he's all about, really. Whether that was Red Bull, the team, the strategist, or Sergio Perez asking to go on those tyres. But even once he was on those tyres, and yes, you can say it's the better tyres, he was doing better times, but he still got to go out there and put those laps together. And as I said, he was absolutely immense over the entire Grand Prix weekend. Could have seen him win in Saudi Arabia. This Monaco Grand Prix, though, is his first win of the season, and in my opinion, puts him in that conversation for those top spots. Charles Leclerc looking a little bit wavy over the last few weekends. Max Verstappen still looking exceptionally good, but, you know, dropping behind Sergio Perez in this one does give Sergio Perez those extra few points. Obviously, the extra DNF for Max Verstappen as well. Sergio Perez is slowly putting himself in the conversation for those top 2 spots, and I think, personally, is going to put pressure on Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen over the course of the season, but we just have to celebrate today. We have to celebrate Sergio Perez. He's the best driver from North America that we've ever seen. Absolutely sensational over the course of the weekend, and I can't believe that Sergio Perez was without a Formula One seat just a couple of years ago. Racing Point / Aston Martin must be kicking themselves, because since Sergio Perez has turned up in a Red Bull, he's just found another level. He's found that level that allows him to win races. His 3rd win in Formula One. I think there's lots more to come in this Red Bull car, possibly even more seasons with Sergio Perez as that 2nd driver in Red Bull, and I'm really, really impressed with how he's done. Someone who wasn't impressed at the end of the Monaco Grand Prix, though, was Charles Leclerc. Has to go down as my first loser of the Monaco Grand Prix weekend. And the curse continues. Curse light for Charles Leclerc. Obviously finished the Monaco Grand Prix for the first time in a very, very long time. But it wasn't the way he wanted to end it, and ended up actually being very, very upset with the Ferrari team when the checkered flag did drop. And, you know, the weather played a huge part in it. He had that pole position on the Saturday, looked really quick on the Saturday, and looked like he was going to convert that into a victory. But the rain came down, and Ferrari's strategy was completely wrong. I think they made a mistake, and we see this a few times from Ferrari, where they just don't quite get the strategy as we would expect, and they don't quite go the way you'd maybe expect them to, especially with Sergio Perez coming in for the intermediate tyres, as we touched on. He was going exceptionally quickly, yes, but you'd think they'd bring in Carlos Sainz, of the 2 drivers, to, you know, go for that risky strategy. You'd expect it to be Carlos Sainz, as he's the driver behind, but Charles Leclerc comes in for the intermediate tyres, and it was just too late at that point. The slicks were almost ready to go on. We saw Carlos Sainz play it right in the end, went straight onto the slick tyres from the wet compound tyres, did Carlos Sainz, and that ended up keeping him in 2nd place. Yes, Sergio Perez was still immense and able to get in front of both of the Ferraris, but at least Carlos Sainz kept his position, whereas Charles Leclerc dropped obviously outside of the podiums into 4th place, and it just raises those concerns again. And Charles Leclerc said himself that we cannot do that, was his main quote after the Grand Prix. He knows that that was a mistake. He knows that that is going to cost them over the course of the season, and when fine margins and little points gains can be the difference between championships and not. We saw last season, obviously, with Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen going all the way down to the wire. I think Charles Leclerc thinks this championship will go all the way down to the wire again, and with more races, less points available as we get deeper and deeper into the season, Red Bull looking better and better and better in the Constructors' Championship, it's going to be tough for Charles Leclerc. And for example, all the way back when Sebastian Vettel was a Ferrari driver, they still had some issues, but this weekend he was absolutely immense, and that's why I've put Sebastian Vettel as my 2nd winner from the Monaco Grand Prix weekend. Now, I know it's only a point for Aston Martin, but considering where they started and considering how immense Sebastian Vettel was, I've just got to give it to him because none of it was shown on the TV. We were more interested, obviously, in Sergio Perez, Carlos Sainz, Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc at the front there. Also, the battle between Hamilton and Alonso. But during that sort of intermediate sector of the race where some people were on wet, some people were on intermediates, others were waiting for those slick tyres, Sebastian Vettel just came to life and showed his absolute quality, getting the overtakes done in Monaco. And we saw how difficult it is to overtake in Monaco. Lewis Hamilton was stuck behind Fernando Alonso, driving a bus, effectively, for nearly 40 laps. Sebastian Vettel was scything through the field on those intermediate tyres. Joe, Gasly, Ricciardo, all just fell to Sebastian Vettel's wake. And I think it just shows again why Sebastian Vettel is still around. He's still an exceptional driver. I know it's been about 10 years since he won a world championship, but he's a 4-time world champion for a reason. He was in the battle with the Mercedes cars when he was at Ferrari, and he's still got it. I think there's lots of talk around Sebastian Vettel, whether he'll leave Formula One at the end of the year. But for me, this just showed again how immense a driver he can be. He's shown it's difficult. I think it's going to be difficult for Aston Martin to get up there. They're obviously still trying to draw in the Haases, the Alpha Tauris, if they can even look at the Alpines and the Alfa Romeos of this season. But it's going to be really, really tough for Aston Martin. But they're taking steps in the right direction. Obviously, all the controversy last weekend in Spain, but they're finally turning that into some points with Sebastian Vettel this weekend, and hopefully they can turn it into more points in the future. Even if they did need some wet weather confusion to pick up the point this weekend. And talking about wet weather confusion, I'm going to move to my second losers of the Monaco Grand Prix weekend in the stewards and the FIA, because again, it just wasn't quite right for me. It lacked a lot of communication between them and the fans and the teams, and nobody really knew what was going on for a lot of the beginning of this Grand Prix. Like, I think it was the right decision in the end, but I just think it got there very, very slowly, and it was poorly communicated between everybody on the Formula One weekend. And the formation lap under the safety car made perfect sense to me. You know, we hadn't done any wet weather running this weekend. The teams didn't know what it was going to be like, and the fact that it poured just as the race was about to begin, teams didn't know whether to go for slicks, whether to go for intermediates, whether to go for wet tyres. Like, it made sense to delay it a little bit, then start under the safety car. We saw that it wasn't going to be doable. Like, the rain was continuing to pour. You could see the amount of spray behind these cars. It would just been absolutely blinding for the drivers, and we wouldn't have seen a good race. We'd have just seen chaos ensue. So I think that first red flag made sense to me. I think just from there, it was a little bit weird. Like, we didn't see the safety car go around checking the track to see whether it had dried enough to actually start the Grand Prix. We didn't see whether or not the FIA and the stewards were looking into when this race was going to begin. It just kept getting pushed back, and then we had the second restart. We had the rolling start. Again, I think it was a good decision. We did need a rolling start. It was still a little bit too wet to go on to a full standing start, in my opinion. But then we had the red flag from Mick Schumacher. And again, they kind of got it wrong for me. We had a virtual safety car to begin with, then a full safety car. And then they realized that the barrier wasn't going to be able to put back together again. And then we had a red flag. And again, it just kind of cost us a few laps. And it caused a little bit of confusion because we were like, oh, okay, we've got the safety car. We're getting ready now. People are going to unlap themselves. And then suddenly it didn't, and then suddenly we had a red flag, and again we were waiting, and we didn't know whether the barrier was fixed or not. It wasn't communicated whether the barrier was going to be fixed quickly or slowly, or whether the teams were going to be back out again, and we were just left waiting and wondering. And again, I don't know whether the stewards are just trying to second guess themselves. They came under so much fire at the end of the last season, and Michael Massey obviously lost his job over it. And these new stewards and the FIA have reformed it completely, but it seems like they're still just not quite 100% sure to make decisions a lot of the time. Whilst these two here were definitely not at a loss. The final winners I'm going to touch on, I've kind of comboed two in here. I'm going to go for the British duo of George Russell and Lando Norris. British bias, yes, maybe, but they've both been exceptionally good at the start of this season, and again, just continued that in this Monaco Grand Prix. George Russell, to begin with, continues that streak, finishing in the top 5 in every single race this year. And yes, you could argue, you know, that Mercedes should finish in the top 6 every single race because it is the third fastest car out there, but he's still got to go out there and do it. Similar to Sergio Perez, you know, yes, you can get into the lead, you've still got to keep that lead. Yes, George Russell can get himself into 6th place, into 5th place, but he's still got to go out there, do it, and just pick up those points consistently. He's been so incredibly good. And whether it's through luck or through skill, he's tenacious. He does it every single weekend, just shows exactly what you want from a Formula One driver, and looked like he could have caught the front runners at one point. If that safety car and then red flag hadn't have happened because of Mick Schumacher, I genuinely think George Russell would have been in with a really good shot at having a little go at Charles Leclerc, which would have been very interesting to see, especially with Charles Leclerc being so frustrated in 4th place and George Russell having a go at him. I think could have been a really good battle around Monaco, but unfortunately the red flag happened, everyone went onto slick tyres, and it kind of died a little bit from there. Lando Norris I also want to touch on because he was also exceptional this weekend, picked up the fastest lap for the McLaren team as well, which I thought was really, really impressive. And Lando this season, again, has just been able to keep it ticking over in the same way George Russell has. It's just always seeming to be a good enough result for Lando Norris. And picking up a podium as well in Imola just shows that he's always there or thereabouts. And Ricciardo, I think, is the one. I didn't really want to talk about Ricciardo too much in this video, but I think you do have to touch on it when you talk about Lando Norris. You know, Ricciardo, again, not in the points, not showing anywhere near good enough pace, and it's just not working out for me. I think Daniel Ricciardo at this point also seems dejected. He seems a little bit down about what the situation is like at McLaren, and even the McLaren team is saying, you know, the contract situation with Daniel Ricciardo isn't watertight. There are things that can change. There are things that will happen if he doesn't deliver those results, and I think he's under a lot of pressure right now. We've gone from Daniel Ricciardo being one of the top 3 or 4 drivers in Formula One just a few years ago to really struggling in that McLaren car and being outshone by a very young teammate in Lando Norris. And if you're looking at McLaren right now, McLaren are like, okay, we build this team around Lando Norris, and we kind of see Daniel Ricciardo as a second driver. He's in that position now, and I think will go towards the end of the season. But George Russell, Lando Norris are another set of winners from this Monaco Grand Prix weekend for me. Whereas our final loser has to be Mick Schumacher, and Haas in general as well. We'll touch on Mick Schumacher in a second, but 3 races in a row now without Kevin Magnussen finishing in the points, and it's suddenly looking a little bit more tricky for Haas this year. And Mick into the wall in a street circuit again, obviously got it wrong in Saudi Arabia, wasn't able to take part in that race, hits into Sebastian Vettel in Miami, and now we go to another street circuit in Monaco and he hits into the wall again. Yes, in mixed conditions. Yes, he dipped it into the wet part of the track and spun around, hits the Armco, but it still is Mick Schumacher just not quite being of the level that we expect from him. And, you know, the lack of upgrades from Haas, I questioned last weekend in Spain. They looked pretty good in Spain still, and they still looked okay in Monaco this weekend, but it wasn't quite the level that we need them to be at if they're going to continue to get those points. They are still behind AlphaTauri in terms of the Constructors' Championship, and I've been pretty critical of AlphaTauri this year. I don't think Pierre Gasly has been very good in many of these races. Yuki Tsunoda has also been very 50-50, and AlphaTauri haven't delivered a very good car at all in most of these race weekends. And yet, Haas, we've talked very positively about. We've talked about Kevin Magnussen being really good. We've talked about Mick Schumacher making steps in the right direction, and yet still they aren't quite able to get in front of AlphaTauri, and it's going to be a really long season for Haas if they can't click into gear in the next couple of races or so, because, as I said, Kevin Magnussen out of the points for 3 races in a row now. Mick Schumacher still not looking like he's going to pick up that first point in Formula One. It's going to get tricky as there's less and less races to go. But that's for the Haas team to sort out over the next few races. Instead, we have to still celebrate Sergio Perez. Overall, we saw an incredible Monaco Grand Prix, in my opinion. Yes, the weather added to it massively, but still very entertaining to see those cars on wets, on intermediates, on slick tyres, and changing between the 3 over the course of those 30 laps or so. I think once we saw it move on to the slick tyres after the second red flag, it became a little bit more of a parade, but we still had 30 laps of really good high-octane racing. And you know what? Monaco did deliver. Whether or not this is the final Monaco Grand Prix we will ever see is still up in the air. Formula One and Monaco haven't come to an agreement in terms of the contract for next year, and I think it's going to be a long process. Monaco and Formula One are synonymous with one another, but Monaco and Formula One right now are not happy working together. They have conflicts around sponsors, conflicts around TV, and I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments down below. Does Formula One need Monaco more than Monaco needs Formula One? That's kind of the debate that's going on right now. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Whilst you're down there, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.